Back in May, me and my wife Paige started jogging regularly, about 3 times a week. There's this long path that goes by the lake, and it is perfect for a late night stroll. Over the weeks that followed, we started meeting people along the trail who eventually joined us. After about 2 months, in late July, we had 8 people who ran alongside us every Saturday. Mondays and Wednesdays were still just me and Paige. We've since stopped jogging by the lake. I need to tell somebody why. At the start of August, the streetlights around the lake were taken down. Apparently, there were a lot of damages from the summer rains, and it was too inefficient to just keep repairing them. Barely anyone ever used that trail anyway. "Fine," Paige said. "We'll jog in the dark." And so we did. We started wearing these head-mounted flashlights on our weekly jogs, and over time we grew a nickname, Night Runners Club. We thought it sounded sufficiently 80s to be cool enough for our generation. Frank from the hardware store suggested we'd get t-shirts, but that was a step too far. We settled for wearing baseball caps to support the local kids team instead. A jog usually takes around 45 to 50 minutes. I usually pace myself to stay last, as Paige has a bit of a busted knee and needs a bit more extra time to get around. She also needs to take regular breaks. The others usually don't have that problem. Our routine was to have a jog, and everyone meet up at the finish line to chat, hydrate, and wander off into the night. The route itself is pretty uneventful. It is a straight gravel path that goes by the fishing side of a local lake, simply called Frog Lake. After that, it takes a turn through a muddy forest path. Whoever runs first usually keeps it clear for the others, in case some branches or something have fallen. After the forest path, there's a short paved section next to a residential area. Then we move back onto a forest path, and then we're back at the start. Simple enough. The last night we ran wasn't anything in particular. There were 9 of us this time, as Frank from the hardware store had brought his fiancée. We'd been dying to meet her, as she was from out of town and we'd heard all sorts of rumours about her. We were sorely disappointed. She was entirely too regular. We all had a short get-together and stretched, and then we set out. We still weren't entirely comfortable with running in the dark, but with our flashlights, we'd do okay. We wore our name with a sort of cheesy pride. Night Runners Club. Paige and I set the slowest pace, and everyone else went ahead. Paige had been moving out the old furniture from the guest bedroom, so her knee was acting up a bit more than usual. She'd insisted on coming along anyway, but I could tell she was struggling. She didn't take kindly to my suggestion to slow down, or even go home. Nah, she was a night runner now. How could she call herself that if she couldn't do a little jog? It was a painfully slow jog at first. We had to stop 3 times before we even reached the forest path. Paige had a lot of trouble even standing up, and she even fell once, scraping her hand on the gravel. I offered to support her, but she just powered through the pain. "I'm fine," she insisted. "You can go ahead if you want." Of course I couldn't. As we got to the forest path, we noticed one of the flashlights. The headband had snapped, and the flashlight just laid in the mud. It lit up the path and the muddied footsteps of those who ran ahead. The others were too far ahead that we couldn't hear them anymore, so we stopped to pick up the lost flashlight. It was a strange thing to lose. Paige stopped to check it. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah," she said, looking at the muddy footsteps. "Just give me a second." I couldn't help but follow her eyes. There was something with those footsteps. We picked up the pace and hurried down the forest path. It felt a bit extra dark, as it was a cloudy night. It was getting a bit humid. Rain was coming. By the time we got through the forest path, we looked down the long residential road. There was no one there. Maybe they were just really fast, or we were really far behind, but we couldn't see any of them. We could usually see at least their flashlights, or hear them in the distance. This time, the road was empty. Paige stopped again, and not because of her knee this time. "They're Probably just up ahead, she said. We should keep going. So we did. It was eerily quiet as the rain started to drizzle. The streetlights were off, and the entire area had this strange air to it. As it started to smell like wet dirt, Paige pulled my arm and kept going down the second forest path. This one was getting even muddier. About halfway down that path, we stopped. We were in the middle of nowhere, not able to see either where we entered or where to exit. Just a few feet off the path, there were lights lying in the grass. At least 6 of them. We stopped and just looked for a while. I went ahead to investigate. I only took a few steps off the path when I suddenly saw the lights rise from the ground. They were the flashlights of the other joggers. They were being held by something. Something large. "Run!" I yelled. "Go!" It was just instinct. I didn't care if it was a bear, a reindeer, or just a branch. I couldn't see what it was either way. Still, something in me told me to run. This wasn't just a fight or flight reaction. It was the most basic instinct working on autopilot. I've been a fight guy many times in my life, but this time there was no choice. This was a threat. I felt it. Paige did her best, but her knee was failing her. I caught up to her and helped her along, but we were slow. This was usually just a light jog, not a full-on sprint. The headlights rattled on the path behind us, at least 12 feet off the ground. I could hear large footsteps, spaced inhumanly long apart. The mud squished. Even above me and Paige's panting and running, we could hear it. We were almost at the end of the second forest path when something was lit up at the end of the trail. By the exit, there were at least 4 people waiting for us. They held something reflective in their hands. Something sharp. Behind us, something was closing in. Paige was almost screaming from the pain, and I was half carrying her. I didn't have time to form a conscious thought. My brain wasn't getting enough oxygen. Paige took me by the arm and pulled me off the trail. We stumbled into the woods. She pulled the flashlight off my head and threw it away. "They see us," she said. We gotta..." I helped take off her flashlight and threw it away. It might give us a few extra seconds. We stumbled through the woods to the best of our abilities, but our legs got scratched and torn from fallen branches and thorn bushes. Paige tried to push me ahead, as if to stay behind. True, she was slowing me down, but I couldn't leave her. Instead, I picked her up. I almost tripped from the imbalance, and she protested, but I had to try. My arms ached with every step, but I couldn't stop. I was completely out of breath, exhausted, and my body just forced itself along with pumping adrenaline. We were on the far side of the lake, away from the residential area. There was a small clearing in the woods, covered in autumn flowers. We got about halfway across the clearing before I tripped. Paige and I tumbled into the flowers, and we could hear something big moving towards us. It had picked up our flashlights and held them with the others. We could hear the plastic rattle. There was something else. 4 people at least. They whispered to one another, and the large thing creaked like stiff branches in response. Their voices were muffled, as if speaking from behind some kind of mask. We just laid there, among the flowers. I held Paige close, and she bit her tongue in order not to scream in pain. I just held her, our panicked breaths in sync. The thing stepped out into the field. The rain was starting to pick up, and the wind was leading our smell northward. The thing was sniffing the air. Luckily, the flowers overpowered our sweat and blood, and with the winds picking up, it wasn't going to find us. Still, the lights dangling from its hand swept back and forth like a searchlight. I kept my eyes on Paige, trying to mentally picture myself somewhere else. Paige, on the other hand, looked up. She was about to scream. I covered her face with my hands and felt the vibrations from her throat. She was trying to scream. An uncontrolled, primal yell. I silently begged her, pleading for her to stop. I shook my head, but all I saw was her eyes going wide, like a cat seeing prey. As the light swept over us, I saw a small part of the thing. A severed hand on the edge of a long insect-like limb, holding our headband flashlights. I didn't even notice how Paige passed out, and as the light swept by us, I heard the large footsteps step over us. It couldn't smell us. It couldn't see us. The 4 people followed the large thing out of the clearing. Paige was unresponsive. As the rain whipped into an outright storm, I performed CPR, my scream for help drowned in the night. Her eyes were still wide open, her pupils dilated to an unnatural degree. Paige made it, but it was a close call. She spent several days in the hospital, and it took her weeks before she started to mentally recover. To this day, she still gets panic attacks, even thinking about that night, and I can see her eyes going wide as she recognizes the smell of those flowers that saved us that night. Blue sunflowers, of all things. Who knew we even had those? The other members of the Night Runners Club didn't return, but the police don't seem too bothered. They're severely understaffed, and people go missing in these woods all the time. Tourists who get lost around the hiking trails mostly. Locals kinda joke about how no one should ever go camping around Frog Lake. Paige didn't want me to post this. She insisted I didn't. She thinks those 4 people who are out there looking for us that night are reading these posts, and that we're risking our lives posting our story. I don't think she's wrong, but I think there's more harm in keeping quiet. I don't know if this will help anyone, but if you live around the Frog Lake area, you know if you know. Remember that the local rumours are there for a reason. Paige's knee is better. Weirdly better. Her pain was thought to be chronic, but lately she doesn't seem to mind. Either the pain is gone, or she's just too distracted to care. She seems a bit out of it still, as if whatever she saw that night still haunts her. So, if someone has any idea why Paige has started doodling "blameless" in her notebook during Zoom meetings, please let me know. I got this itch in my brain that I've seen it somewhere. Be careful out there, and stick to the main roads. We don't need another Night Runners Club.